Filmmaker magazine, and I'm your host for today's Half Hour With. I'm happy to introduce you to our panelists from Apple's Emmy-nominated series, The Morning Show, one of my favorite series this year. With us this afternoon, we have director and executive producer Mimi Leader and production designer John Paino. So welcome to both of you. And before we start, let's take a quick look at a clip from the show, and then we'll dive right in.
Welcome, everyone.
Thank you for joining us.
In our top story today. Bradley, can you take this one?
Yes, of course. A Papua New Guinea-bound Golden Trident cruise luxury liner carrying over 5,000 passengers is in its fourth day of quarantine. Over two-thirds of its passengers and crew stricken with a mysterious illness.
What the fuck is she doing?
I don't know.
Stay on copy, Bradley.
The ship sits moored more than 600 nautical miles from Honolulu. A rescue ship is expected to arrive this afternoon with antibiotics and medical supplies to treat the sick passengers on board. A spokesperson for the cruise line says that they are working day and night to get all of the infected people back to the safety of their homes as soon as possible.
What's your name?
They are, quote, sorry, this cruise
Joe?
is short of the standards.
15 years, I've never met Joe.
What the hell?
All of the ship's passengers will get a full refund due to the outbreak.
Stay on 3.
Those on
Stand by
board
1. What do you want to do?
Just get her ass back in the chair.
Alex,
Papua New Guinea.
Alex, please sit down.
Nope. I don't want to sit down. I'm not sitting down.
So Mimi, before we get into anything else, I want to ask you a question about that particular scene because it's a really key scene in the series. It's a key moment for Alex, the character played by Jennifer Aniston. She's got so many emotions going through her. She's about to find her voice at what's her most vulnerable moment. And I'm curious, what kinds of conversations did you have with Jennifer Aniston, and what kind of an environment do you try to create on set to facilitate an actor's best work in a scene like that?
Well, we had been working toward from the entire season to this moment. So, there was a lot of conversation about this journey that her character went on and this explosion that comes out, and the idea of, throughout the season exploring the nuances of, sexual misconduct and characters being complicit, characters not, seeing things as people used to see them and roll their eyes and not say anything. And silence is just as, damning as anything. And so it's her, her discovery of what she needs to do, her voice, and out of it came this explosion. And, decided not to do we didn't rehearse it. We ran the lines like, these are the lines. I said, just take the stage, walk the stage. We'll follow you. We had 5 PED cameras, 3 PEDs. Those are the show within the show cameras. And, we had a crane and we had our steady cam, and then we had our crew, our cameras. So there were many cameras following the action. And I just wanted it to be as raw and real as it could be. And so a lot of what you see in the final edit is a lot from the first take. And Jen didn't even know she had that, much in her to come out. We were all kind of shocked and excited, about her finding that moment.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up the fact that you didn't really rehearse it. Is that in general your preferred way to do things? And if so, what do you feel you get from not rehearsing versus doing a lot of rehearsal? Because this show has the performances from top to bottom are just incredible.
Yeah, we rehearse a little, but mostly I like to just have them bring it and leave it on the floor.
Well, John, I have to say, this show to me seems in some ways like a production designer's dream. You have so many different kinds of environments, and I've rarely seen a show where the environments that characters occupy say so much about them and about their emotional state. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit, maybe bring us back to the origins of your involvement in this series and how it came to you and what you found attractive about it.
You know, to me, the show is what I look for as a designer is to kind of dive in and dig into subcultures. So, and that's the way you find the characters, because they're inhabiting this world, this really pressure cooker world that takes over their lives. And so that's a big influence on the look of the show and learning about the subculture. Mimi and I, we were fortunate enough to go to the actual tapings of Today's Show and Good Morning America, and that was really great for reference and just to dig into how this world is put together. You know, for instance, in our control room, there's a lot of windows going to the offices, the writers' rooms, and everything pivots. So you get these great POVs, these great portals to shoot through. And that's one of the themes of the show is look through the looking glass, right? We have the set is a big light box. Everything's about this LED glow and these surfaces that reflect people, and also transparency of the characters and this world. So all of that is, grist for the mill of coming with the zeitgeist of the show to me. But digging into this subculture, these people get up at 3 a.m. and this is their life, and how that control room, I think, it was Mimi who said we should make the control room more of the show as the show is developing. The pressure cooker is where everyone is looking at each other, where you really see the show and the drama. And I think going to see the show's film, boy, those control rooms when they were filming, a pin would they reminded me once I went on a submarine because my cousin's an admiral, and when everything everything is so controlled and everything is like by the book and pressure cooker and and what should we show who and the producers are looking over everyone's shoulder. It was great, and I think the show, to everyone's credit, conveys that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad you brought up the control room stuff, because watching those scenes, I just kept thinking, when I watched the show a second time, I was just struck by how complicated those scenes are in the blocking and the fact that you've got multiple monitors. Sometimes the characters are reacting to the monitors. Sometimes it's something in the background. I was wondering if both of you could talk a little bit about that stuff, about like the monitors and whether or not they were actually interacting, whether it was green screen. How did you do all that?
Sometimes we would have it live and sections of it live. When we were going for performances that were on the broadcast stage and they were intercutting with the performances of the control room, we would usually shoot the broadcast stage first. So, for example, in the finale, when Jen is walking through this on the stage and everyone's going rogue and she's speaking her truth, we shot that first, but we also put green screen there because I wasn't sure what takes I was going to use for them to react to. So they always had something to react to, the real scene, when we were on them. So it would be a combination of those things. And I would have to say that, John really created an environment that had such a reality to it. You didn't feel you were on a set. You felt you were really in it. And just the darkness and the light of the monitors and the stacking of the many layers of monitors. Like the way he designed the set is you can see a monitor no matter what angle you're in. You see the world of the morning show. And that was a real character. The control room was a real character in the piece, and John created that beautifully.
As far as the monitors and everything, just so yes, Mimi had green screen she could go to, but everything on the set is all those LEDs, everything, all created, and most of the monitors, what would you say, Mimi? 90% of them in the control room had assets on them, had something that had been pre-taped or an asset that we had purchased, and So it, was really world building. And I always say, if we had a broadcast signal, you probably could have done a show from this. Because as Mimi said, and that was really important, I think, to make sure that she could get live feed, and it's very, that's really important. And boy, there was a lot of wiring.
Yeah. Wiring is unbelievable. And it looks, what's so beautiful in a lot of those shots are the silhouettes behind the actors, behind Mark Duplass mostly, his image as the exec producer of the show against those monitors. It was, always kind of a signature piece or a feel. And it was always great doing those big wide shots against those big tight close-ups because it just had a very dramatic impact.
Mimi, you bringing up the alternating between the wide shots and the close-ups. And another thing I love about this show is how varied the visual style is. Sometimes you've got your sort of signature long runners like you used to have on ER. Sometimes you go for more standard coverage. Sometimes you have something like the opening scene of the interview episode where you're showing Yanko in quick cuts and fragments and things like that. And I'm curious, for you as a director, I know this is a ridiculously broad question, but how do you make those kinds of decisions? Is that just intuitive to you at this point? Or what kinds of factors going into deciding how you're going to cover a specific scene?
Well, it's really interesting. When we started this show, I said to Michael Grady, our director of photography, and to John Paino, there are no rules. Because normally I set rules, with John. We will go, okay, we're not going to have any red on this set, or we're not going to do any green, or we're not going to go to a certain palette. And we would set that. So we talked very much about the blue that we saw in the real world. And with Michael Grady and I, we often go, okay, we're going to do this whole thing handheld and long lenses, and that's what we're going to do. But this world was so full and required so many different levels of emotion, and it was so complex. The characters' lives were complex, so I felt that the visuals had to be complex. For example, as you mentioned, in the beginning of the interview, there's little cuts of Yanko. And that's how I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be like really tight and start on his mouth and his nose and just feel fragments and feel the storm coming by making it jittery. And, and then we'd do oneers, a little nod to ER. And, it was fun not having any rules because it just kept us really open to filming in a way that was truthful to the scenes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's funny in a way that you say there's no rules because it also feels like a very disciplined show. It feels like the camera movement is always very, very linked to what's going on with the characters. And John, I wanted to ask you about your collaboration with the cinematographer, because it seems to me like the production design and cinematography are so integrated on this show in terms of talking about the monitors, talking about the fact that the cameras actually are shooting things. What kinds of conversations, what kind of collaboration did you have with the DP?
Well, there was a big concern, and because the set is a big light box, and it also has a lot of Duratrams in it. So my thing with Michael was doing a lot of tests. We actually made some of the pylons. We made some samples of them and tried different LEDs in them, because with this kind of set, you don't want to put all this lighting into it and then find that you turn it on and everyone's green, or that the Duratrams, which are the colored plastic that has the designs in them, when they go into those light boxes and it's lit enough for Michael, so that I don't know how much he used the light of the set really to light, probably a little bit, but wanting it to look real, you don't want those images to be washed out. And if he needs to, make the LEDs a little brighter, or he needs to color correct them, or maybe at one show we didn't have all the scripts, we might change them, or the show, or there might be lights in them. They might you might want the set to look different by turning off the red LEDs and turning up the blue. So it was, a lot of it was the lighting. And, we tested that and just to find that sweet spot. And also just all of these monitors, we had to make sure they didn't roll, that they worked for his cameras and they worked for the PED cameras. So it's quite complicated. And as far as shooting it, I just know that, Mimi wanted to have a set. We put the control room in the center so that people could walk around the hallways and kind of get back from A to Z. I think we did a nice job with, giving enough walking space. Then the, figuring out with everybody where the dressing rooms go next to the offices, and you could really walk it. I think it was good to put the control room in the center too. But as far as, shooting, I know Mimi wanted, and we all wanted a set that was, big and open. So if, Reese wanted to talk about someone, behind a piece of scenery, Mimi could creep over and get that shot. So as far as cinematography, just, keeping the options open by making the set, usable in that way was important.
And also, I will add to that, the color of the walls. John worked very closely with Michael Grady in terms of not having white walls, having grays, having dark blue walls, having good colors that the actors would look good against, and, we shot also in a 2-to-1 ratio, which is a wider format and a taller format. And because we wanted the characters to be on one side of the frame and have the city or the set, be another character in the frame. And we worked really hard to achieve that.
The set was, Disneyland, and the hallways in the offices are supposed to be more monochromatic and mundane. They are the worker bee area, and the set, when people go on the set, it's, oh, what's a Magic Kingdom?
And I would also add that the lighting that John was talking about in the broadcast stage was very bright and very, almost not washed out, but very bright, as it was when we saw it. And we wanted the lighting to be much more complex and saturated when we'd walk into those hallways, when we would go to Jen's apartment, or we'd go to a bar, and we'd want it to have lots of darks and lights and to reflect, the complexity of their characters, because these characters were all very flawed.
Mm-hmm.
And, beautifully written by Carrie Aaron, I may add.
Yeah, well, that brings up something else I wanted to ask you both about, which is the design of some of their private spaces, because I feel like, especially with the Alex character and the Mitch character, their living spaces are so reflective of who they are. And I was wondering what the sort of philosophy was behind Alex's apartment.
My philosophy was that I wanted to, and I think Mimi, we always wanted to have it have 2 levels. So I really tried to get a vertical feel to it. And at one point we actually had a second floor that had a walkway on the top that we ended up not doing. But as far as her vertical, she's kind of in a glass box, because we liked some of the architecture on the that we had. We all looked at several buildings and things, but that verticality I really thought was good for her.
And it was also the glass was great because her character is this icon who's been a lead anchor and extremely famous for the last 15 years, and we wanted her to feel like she was in this glass box and untouchable, and that she was isolated from the rest of the world. And that's how what happens when you're famous, and that's what happens when you're a celebrity. People put you in this position where you are untouchable and where you have to protect yourself. And a lot of what Alex's journey was the cracking of that glass.
Well, and then I wanted to ask actually John about a specific shot. I think it's in episode 3 or 4. There's a scene where Alex is sort of running through her apartment from room to room, like she's going to leave and go see Mitch, and the camera's outside and goes past all the windows. For a shot like that, I mean, when you were designing the apartment set, I mean, was that something, since it was in the middle of the show, was that something you knew about was going to happen early on, or how did that come about? And what kind of conversations did you have with David Frankel about that?
No, I think that he just reacted to the fact that you could do that with the windows, and I think that was it. I think it says something about what we wanted to say about Alex, and we could do that. We could do it. We just added a little bit more cladding and VFX, did a little bit more work outside. And it was it was really nice.
And David Lanzenberg was the director of photography of that episode and that shot. And I know it was their collaboration that, brought that to life. And it was really interesting seeing it at a distance. It was a very smart shot in terms of peering in on a private moment between a married couple that was falling apart. And like I said, no rules. Some shows you go, no, you can't shoot from outside that window. That's not how we do it. And I think, when you are doing a show that's a 10-episode show and you're inviting, directors to come on in, you want great directors to bring their own and make it great.
Well, that was a question I had for you, Mimi, in terms of putting on your executive producer hat. You established the look of the show in the first couple episodes, and you come back at the end, and then in between, there are all these other directors. And I'm curious how you see your role as far as preserving and protecting the style the show has been established, but also sort of encouraging those directors to bring what they can to it.
Yeah. Well, we hire directors who are pretty great, are great. They know what they're doing. So my job as an exec producer is to maintain the look of the show visually, emotionally, but it's also to encourage the other directors to bring something surprising, bring something of their own to it. No rules, unless what they're doing is not great. But usually what they would do is pretty great. And, we had pretty great directors, Lynn Shelton, David Frankel, Roxanne Dawson, I know Kevin Bray, Tucker, many, many very strong directors.
We've got time for an audience question or two, but before I go to those, I want to ask you guys, there are probably some people watching this who haven't seen the morning show yet. And so I'm curious, what would you both tell them about the show to make them want to drop everything and start binging it?
I think it's the subculture, this culture of morning news, that these two, Alex and Mitch, they're in everyone's, people wake up to them. They have breakfast with them. But now we're going to see what really goes on behind the scenes. And I think it's timely. And I think it addresses things that are going on, that have gone on for too long. So on those 2 points, and the cast, those 3 things, if that's not enough, there's always Tiger King.
Yeah, I ditto everything John is saying. We wake up to these morning shows, we brush our teeth, we get dressed. They offer comfort. And I would say what we do on this show is peel the curtain back. And, this show examined, the predatory culture of toxicity in the workplace, dropping us right into the Me Too movement. And, we explored all those things, and we explored complicity, and we discussed what is the truth. So there's what may seem as a shallow show about morning television. It isn't. It's a show about how these characters function in that world and how they get through it and the stories they tell themselves.
I think one of the surprising things for me rewatching the show is Steve Carell and Jennifer's relationship. How you think everything about this. You think it's clear cut, but how they keep looping back with each other. And it's fascinating. Mitch going to her for absolution, going to the crew for absolution. These are really interesting. They really bring out this complex, like what people are. People are conflicted, complex, they make mistakes, and we're all complicit in each other's behaviors. Doesn't justify it, but it's very interesting on that level. And it was really great to see those scenes again, because I'd forgotten how interesting Jen and Steve's relationship was.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think the show really makes things that are difficult and complex, so it just addresses them in such a fresh and interesting way. I mean, I think it's just fantastic. But anyway, so we're going to try to squeeze in an audience question here before we go. We're almost out of time, but somebody wrote in, was the series actually shot in New York? And if not, how did you so convincingly portray the city?
Magic.
Good.
We shot the show in Los Angeles. We shot the show exteriors, a lot of the exteriors in New York. We would be on a street in Los Angeles shooting, and we'd turn a corner and we'd then be in New York. And production design very much connects those things. In terms of the last scene, when Jen comes, when Reese decides to leave, she's done. They came out of a building that was not our building, but CG, we put in those pillars that John had created, the colors, and all of a sudden you're connected.
Yeah, it's a mix of good locations and having a great production. My crew is great. We had a really good locations department, and it's just a lot of hard work trying to find things that we can alter and make work.
All right. Well, we are out of time, so I want to finish by saying thank you to our friends at Apple and to Mimi and John for talking with us today, and to all of you who are listening to our panel from your couch or office or wherever you are right now. Thank you.